The fluorescent lights of the convenience store flickered like dying stars as Benita Obi counted her last coins with trembling fingers. 3,001, barely enough for the cheapest formula. Her baby girl hadn't eaten in 6 hours. Behind her in line stood a man in a black suit who radiated danger like heat from asphalt, his dark eyes tracking her every movement as she reached for the formula with hands that shook from exhaustion and fear. When the cashier announced the price was actually 3,501, Benita's world collapsed. She started returning the formula to the shelf, whispering apologies to a daughter who wasn't there to hear them. That's when his hand shot past her shoulder, black card already extended. "Take everything you want." His voice was silk over steel, deep enough to vibrate in her chest. "I'll pay." She should have refused, should have walked away. But when their eyes met in the reflection of the freezer door, something impossible awakened inside Kang Min-ho, something that whispered mine with the inevitability of gravity. Welcome to K Fairy Tales Stories, besties. Please like, share, and subscribe. Benita grabbed the formula and ran before the stranger could speak again. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she pushed through the convenience store door into Seoul's November cold. Behind her, she heard the electronic chime as the door opened again. She didn't look back. She couldn't afford to look back at men in expensive suits who looked at her like she was something precious instead of invisible. Her apartment was 12 blocks away in Itaewon's cheapest building, the one where the heat only worked half the time and the elevator had been broken for 3 months. Benita climbed the stairs 2 at a time, the formula clutched against her chest like a lifeline. Inside apartment 304, her neighbor Mrs. Kim sat with 6-month-old Ada sleeping in her arms. "She wouldn't stop crying," Mrs. Kim said softly in broken English mixed with Korean. "I think she knows her mama needs rest." The older woman's eyes were kind but tired. Benita knew she couldn't keep asking for help. Mrs. Kim had her own grandchildren to watch. "Thank you," Benita whispered, taking her daughter with gentle hands. "I have formula now. Ada will be okay." As she prepared the bottle with the last of her hot water, she tried not to think about the man in the convenience store. Tried not to remember how his gaze had felt like being seen for the first time in months. Tried not to wonder why someone who clearly had everything would pay attention to someone who had nothing. The next morning brought rain that Seoul seemed to specialize in, the kind that soaked through cheap jackets and reminded you exactly how far you were from home. Benita dressed Ada in the warmest clothes she had, wrapped her in 3 blankets, and headed to the restaurant where she worked 12-hour shifts washing dishes. The owner, Mr. Cho, didn't allow babies in the kitchen, so Benita left Ada with Mrs. Kim again, promising to be back by 10. The restaurant sat in Gangnam's financial district, surrounded by glass towers full of people who spent more on lunch than Benita made in a week. She entered through the back door, tied her hair back, and plunged her hands into water hot enough to scald. Around her, the kitchen moved with controlled chaos. Chefs shouted orders. Servers rushed through with trays balanced perfectly, and Benita scrubbed dishes until her hands were raw, thinking about formula and rent, and the fact that she had exactly 70,001 left until next week's pay. A few hours later, the kitchen manager Kim appeared beside her station. "There's a situation in the private dining room," he said. "The regular server called in sick. You'll need to cover." Benita's stomach dropped. "I'm not trained for front of house." "You speak English." The private client requested someone who speaks English. He handed her a clean uniform. "Change quickly. Upstairs. Room 7. The uniform was too tight across her hips and chest, but there was no time to find another. Benita finger-combed her hair, wiped water from her face, and headed upstairs with a tray of expensive whiskey that probably cost more than her entire month's salary. Room 7's door was solid wood with brass handles. She knocked twice before entering. The private dining room was all dark wood and soft lighting, designed for people who made decisions that changed other people's lives. 5 Korean men in suits sat around the table, their conversations stopping the moment she entered. And at the head of the table, watching her with the same intensity as the night before, was the man from the convenience store. Benita nearly dropped the tray. His eyes tracked her movement as she set down glasses with shaking hands, poured whiskey with more care than she'd ever given anything, and tried to become invisible again. It didn't work. She could feel his attention like weight, like hands pressing down on her shoulders, even though he hadn't moved. "What's your name?" one of the other men asked in Korean. She understood enough to answer. Benita, I work in kitchen normally. The man who'd asked smiled, but it wasn't kind. Your Korean is terrible. Where are you from? Nigeria? She said quietly. I'm sorry, my Korean is not good. I'm learning. The man laughed, said something to his companions that made them chuckle. Benita didn't catch all the words, but she understood enough. African, poor, probably here illegally. The familiar shame burned through her chest, the same shame she'd carried since arriving in Seoul 6 months pregnant and desperate. That's enough, the man from the convenience store said. His voice cut through the laughter like a blade, sharp enough that everyone went quiet. The other men shifted uncomfortably, suddenly very interested in their drinks. He looked at Benita with dark eyes that held something she couldn't name. Leave the bottle. You can go. She left quickly, closing the door behind her with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. In the hallway, she pressed her back against the wall and tried to breathe. 3 years in Seoul and she still wasn't used to the casual cruelty, the way people looked through her like she was made of glass, the comments about her skin and her accent, and her right to exist in spaces designed for people who looked nothing like her. That evening, after her shift ended and she'd collected Ada from Mrs. Kim's apartment, Benita sat on her floor and counted money. 70,000 won plus tonight's tips brought her to 82,000. Rent was due in 4 days. 300,000 won. She was short by more than half. The landlord had already threatened eviction twice. There would be no third warning. She looked at Ada sleeping in the second-hand crib, her daughter's face peaceful and perfect, and completely unaware that they were drowning. Benita had tried everything, extra shifts at the restaurant, selling her jewelry, asking the Nigerian church for help, until even they started avoiding her calls. She'd applied for legal work permits and been denied 3 times. Her tourist visa had expired 4 months ago, making her officially illegal and essentially unemployable anywhere legitimate. The next morning brought more rain and a knock on her door that made Benita's blood run cold. She opened it to find her landlord, Mr. Park, with his arms crossed and his expression carved from stone. "Rent," he said in Korean. "Today. Or you leave." "I need more time," Benita said in her halting Korean. "Please, 2 more days. I get paid. No more time. Today or out." He looked past her at Ada in the crib. "You have, baby. You need be responsible." The irony of being told to be responsible by a man charging illegal rent for an apartment that barely functioned wasn't lost on Benita. She had 4 hours to come up with 200,000 won, or she and Ada would be on the street. She called everyone she knew. The church secretary said they'd already helped her twice and couldn't justify more assistance. Her friend Chioma in Itaewon said she barely had rent for herself. Mrs. Kim offered 50,000 won that Benita couldn't accept because she knew the older woman needed it for medicine. By noon, Benita was walking through Gangnam with Ada strapped to her chest in a carrier, looking for anything. Day labor jobs paid cash, street cleaning, moving boxes, anything that wouldn't require documentation. But everywhere she went, people took one look at her and Ada and shook their heads. Nobody wanted a woman with a baby. Nobody wanted someone who looked like her. Nobody wanted the complication. She found herself outside a building she recognized from TV news reports, one of those places people whispered about. Lotte Group Tower. The kind of building where serious money happened, where men in expensive suits made decisions about other people's futures. She shouldn't go inside. She had no business being there. But desperation made people do impossible things. The lobby was all marble and gold, designed to make regular people feel small. Security guards watched her immediately, their hands moving toward their radios. Benita walked to the reception desk with her chin up and her daughter held close. "I need to see someone about a loan," she said in English, hoping the receptionist understood. "Emergency family situation." The receptionist, a young woman with perfect makeup and colder eyes, looked her up and down. "This isn't a bank. You need to leave." "Please," Benita said. "Someone told me this building helps people. I need help. I have a baby." The security guards were moving closer now. The receptionist's expression hardened. "Leave now or we call police." Benita turned to go, shame and desperation warring in her chest. She made it 3 steps before a voice stopped everyone cold. "Let her through." The voice came from behind her, deep and commanding. Benita turned and there he was again. The man from the convenience store. The man from the private dining room, now standing in the lot tower lobby like he owned it. His suit today was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, and his expression was carved from stone. But his eyes found hers with that same intensity that made her feel seen and terrified in equal measure. "Mr. Kang," the receptionist stammered. "I didn't realize you knew this woman." "I don't," he said. "Yet." His gaze never left Benita's face. "But I'm about to. Bring her to my office, now." The guard stepped back immediately. The receptionist bowed so low her forehead nearly hit the desk, and Benita stood frozen, Ada stirring against her chest, wondering what kind of man made people move with just his voice. She should run. Every instinct screamed it, but she also needed 200,001 by the end of the day, or she and Ada would be sleeping in a park. So when the receptionist gestured toward the private elevators, Benita followed. The elevator rose 60 floors without stopping. Benita watched the numbers climb and tried to steady her breathing. Ada whimpered against her chest. She bounced gently, whispering comfort in Igbo, the language of home that Ada would probably never know. The man, Mr. Kang, stood perfectly still in the corner, his attention fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin feel too tight. "Why are you here?" he asked in English. His accent was barely noticeable, the kind that came from international schools and time abroad. Benita met his eyes in the elevator's reflection. "I need money. My rent is due. I have 4 hours to pay or me and my daughter will be homeless." "How much?" 200,001. The number sounded absurd coming out of her mouth. In this building, that was probably what they spent on coffee. The elevator opened directly into an office that looked like it belonged in magazines. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Seoul's sprawl. The furniture was modern and expensive. Art that Benita recognized from a museum visit hung on the walls, and in the center of it all sat a desk made of black wood that probably cost more than everything she owned. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a chair. She sat, Ada now sleeping against her chest, despite the tension radiating through Benita's body. He moved to his desk, pulled out a checkbook, wrote something quickly, and handed her a check. Benita stared at the number. 5,000,000 won. "This is too much," she whispered. "I only need 200,000. I don't need charity." His expression didn't change. "It's not charity. It's an investment." Her head snapped up. "An investment in what?" "In you." He leaned against his desk, arms crossed, studying her like she was a puzzle he intended to solve. "You need money. You need stability. You need someone to help you navigate Seoul's systems. I need something too." Benita's stomach turned cold. "I'm not doing anything illegal, and I'm not sleeping with you for money." His smile was sharp. "I don't pay for sex. I pay for solutions. You have a problem. I have a solution. All I want in return is information." "Information about what?" "The restaurant where you work. Specifically, the private dining rooms. The people who use them. What they talk about when they think no one's listening." Benita stood. Ada clutched protectively against her. "You want me to spy for you?" "Exactly." He pushed off the desk, moving closer. "I want you to be my eyes and ears in places I can't access. In return, you get money, protection, a work visa, legal status, everything you need to build a life here." She should refuse, should walk out, should do literally anything except accept money from a man who looked at her like she was something he wanted to own. But Ada made a small sound in her sleep, and Benita thought about the formula she could barely afford, about the rent she couldn't pay, about the fact that being illegal in Seoul meant being invisible and expendable. "What happens if I say no?" she asked. "Then you leave with nothing and I forget you exist." He moved even closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, expensive and masculine. "But if you say yes, I'll make sure you and your daughter never have to choose between rent and food again." She looked at the check in her hand. 5,000,000 won, enough to pay rent for months, enough to buy formula and diapers and maybe even save something, enough to stop drowning just long enough to learn how to swim. "I'll do it," she heard herself say. "But I want more than money. I want a promise." "What kind of promise?" "That you'll help me get permanent legal status here, that you'll protect my daughter if something happens to me, that this doesn't end with me owing you something I can't pay." His eyes darkened with something that looked like approval. "You're smarter than you pretend to be. I like that." He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. My driver will take you home. Tomorrow you'll start your new position at the restaurant. Front of house, private dining rooms. You'll report to me weekly about anything interesting you hear. And Benita, he stepped close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Don't lie to me. I reward loyalty and I destroy betrayal. There's no middle ground. The ride home was in a car that cost more than Benita would make in 10 years. The driver was silent and professional, dropping her at her building without comment. She climbed the stairs to her apartment with Ada still sleeping and the check burning against her chest like a brand. Inside, she sat on her floor and cried. Not from relief exactly, but from the terrible understanding that she'd just sold something she couldn't get back. The following week changed everything. Benita reported to the restaurant in her new uniform, properly fitted this time, and was assigned to the private dining rooms permanently. The tips alone were more than her old salary. The kitchen manager treated her with new respect that felt like fear. And every night, she listened to conversations in Korean and English and Japanese, memorizing names and deals and information she barely understood. On Friday, she met with Kang Min-ho in his office. She handed him handwritten notes about shipping schedules and contract negotiations and a man who'd bragged about avoiding taxes through offshore accounts. Min-ho read her notes without expression, then looked at her with something that might have been respect. "This is good work," he said. "Better than I expected. Did you know these people are criminals? Are you one too?" she asked before she could stop herself. His smile was sharp enough to cut. "Yes, but I'm the kind of criminal who keeps his word." He stood, moved around his desk. "You've earned your pay." The check he handed her was for another 2 million won. Benita stared at it. "This is too much for 1 week of listening. Consider it a bonus for proving useful." He moved closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth, and for being brave enough to ask if I'm a criminal. Most people are too scared to ask questions. "I'm too desperate to be scared," she said quietly. He studied her for a long moment. "That desperation is going to get you killed or make you powerful. We'll see which. Now go home to your daughter. I'll have more work for you next week." The weeks that followed fell into a pattern that felt dangerous and addictive. Benita worked the private dining rooms, collected information, and delivered it to Min-ho every Friday. He paid her well enough that she moved to a better apartment in Itaewon, one with heat that actually worked and an elevator that functioned. She bought Ada new clothes and quality formula and toys that weren't secondhand. She started saving money for the first time since arriving in Seoul. But more than the money, she found herself looking forward to Friday meetings. Min-ho was dangerous, she knew that. He was involved in things she didn't want to understand, but he also listened when she talked, asked about Ada, made sure she had everything she needed, treated her like she was intelligent instead of invisible. One Friday in December, Benita arrived at his office to find him standing at the windows, his posture tight with tension. She set her notes on his desk. "Bad day? Complicated day?" he said without turning. "One of my suppliers is trying to renegotiate terms. He thinks I'm weak because I haven't retaliated against his previous betrayals. He thinks mercy is the same as weakness." "Is it?" she asked. He turned to look at her. Sometimes mercy is strategy. Let people think you're weak until the moment you prove you're not." He crossed to his desk, picked up her notes. "You're getting better at this. Your observations are more detailed. You're starting to understand what matters." "I'm starting to understand that everyone in those rooms is lying about something," she said. "Including you." His smile was genuine this time. "Especially me. But I've never lied to you, Benita. Everything I've promised, I've delivered." She couldn't argue with that. In the past month, he'd helped her apply for a proper work visa, paid for a lawyer to handle her immigration status, and made sure Ada had access to a pediatrician who didn't ask questions about insurance. He'd done more for her than anyone since she arrived in Seoul. "Why?" she asked suddenly. "Why help me this much? You could have hired anyone for this work." He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the city below. "Because when I saw you in that convenience store, counting your last coins for formula, I saw someone fighting to survive, despite everything being stacked against her. I respect that kind of strength." "This is more than respect," Benita said quietly. "You're protecting me like I'm valuable." "Am I?" "You're useful," he said, but there was something in his voice that suggested useful wasn't the whole truth. "Go home, Benita. It's late. Your daughter needs you." She left feeling more confused than ever. He was a criminal. She knew that. But he was also the only person in Seoul who'd treated her like she mattered. That night, while Ada slept in her crib, Benita lay awake thinking about Kang Min-ho, about the way his eyes softened when he asked about Ada, about how his voice changed when he said her name, about the strange pull she felt toward him despite knowing he was dangerous. She was falling into something she couldn't climb out of, and the terrifying part was that she wasn't sure she wanted to. The Seoul winter bit hard that January, wrapping the city in cold that seeped through expensive coats and cheap ones alike. Benita had been working for Min-ho for 2 months now, and her life had transformed in ways she still couldn't fully process. The apartment in Itaewon had heat. Ada had toys. The fear that used to wake her at 3 in the morning had dulled to a background hum instead of a constant scream. But something else had changed too, something she didn't want to name. On a Tuesday night, she was serving a private dining room when one of the clients, a Japanese businessman named Tanaka, grabbed her wrist as she poured his wine. His Korean was slurred with alcohol. "You're very beautiful," he said, his grip tightening. "Too beautiful to be just a server. How much would it cost to have you for the evening?" Benita froze, her training warring with her instinct to pull away violently. "I'm not available," she said in English, trying to keep her voice steady. "Please let go." Tanaka laughed, said something to his companions in Japanese that made them chuckle. His hand slid up her arm. "Everything has a price. Name yours." The door opened before she could respond. Min-ho entered the private dining room with the controlled fury of a storm barely contained. His eyes went immediately to Tanaka's hand on Benita's arm, and something cold and lethal crossed his features. "Remove your hand," he said in Japanese, his voice soft and absolutely deadly. Now, Tanaka looked up, his expression shifting from arrogant to uncertain. "Mr. Kang, I didn't realize this woman belonged to you." "She doesn't belong to anyone," Min-ho said, switching to English so Benita would understand every word. "But she works for me, and when someone touches what's mine without permission, I take it personally." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Tanaka released Benita immediately, his face pale. "I apologize. I meant no disrespect." Min-ho's smile was sharp as broken glass. "You meant exactly what you did, but I'm feeling generous tonight. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to settle your bill, leave this restaurant, and never set foot in any establishment I control again. And if I hear you've touched another woman without her consent, I'll make sure the Nakamura family in Tokyo hears about your gambling debts and your mistress in Osaka." Tanaka stood so fast his chair fell backward. He bowed deeply, repeatedly, backing toward the door while still apologizing. His companions followed quickly, leaving behind half-finished meals and an atmosphere thick with tension. When they were gone, Min-ho turned to Benita. His expression had softened, but something intense still burned in his eyes. "Are you all right?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. He moved closer, his hand lifting toward her arm where Tanaka had grabbed her, then stopping just short of touching. "Did he hurt you?" "No," she whispered. "You stopped him. I shouldn't have to stop them at all." His jaw clenched. "This is my fault. I put you in these rooms without considering what some of these men would assume about you. I'm pulling you from serving duty. You'll work in the office instead." "But the tips," she started. "I'll pay you double what you made in tips." He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth. "Benita, I don't want you anywhere near men who think they can buy you." His voice dropped lower. "Because if another one touches you like that, I won't be generous. I'll destroy them." The possessiveness in his words should have scared her. Instead, she felt something warm unfurl in her chest, something dangerous and addictive. "Why do you care so much?" she asked. "You barely know me." His eyes held hers, dark and intense and full of things he wouldn't say. "Because knowing you is the best decision I've made in years. Now let's get you home. Your daughter is probably missing you." The drive to her apartment was quiet, but the air between them crackled with unspoken tension. When they arrived, Min-ho's driver stayed in the car while Min-ho himself walked her to the door. "This building is still not safe enough," he said, looking at the dimly lit hallway with disapproval. "I'm moving you somewhere better." "This place is fine," Benita protested. "It has heat and working elevators. That's luxury compared to where I was. It's not good enough." He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. I'm having my people find you something in Gangnam. Secure building. Good schools nearby for when Ada is older. Better neighborhood. Minho, that's too much. Nothing is too much if it means you're safe. He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Don't you understand that yet? Everything I'm doing is to make sure you and your daughter have the life you deserve. Why? She whispered. Why does it matter so much to you? Because the first time I saw you, something in me recognized something in you. He moved closer, his hand lifting to cup her face with infinite gentleness. Because watching you count your last coins for baby formula broke something inside me that I didn't know could still break. Because every time I see you, I want to give you the world, and I don't know how to stop wanting that. You're a criminal, she said, but her voice was soft, uncertain. And I'm a single mother from Nigeria who shouldn't trust anything you say. Then don't trust my words. His thumb brushed across her cheek. Trust my actions. Trust that I've kept every promise I've made. Trust that I would burn this city down before I let anyone hurt you again. He left before she could respond, leaving her standing in the hallway with her heart racing and her mind spinning. She went inside to find Mrs. Kim rocking Ada, who was crying with the kind of fury only babies could achieve. She wouldn't settle, Mrs. Kim said apologetically. I think she wants her mama. Benita took her daughter, felt the small body relax immediately against her chest. Thank you for watching her. Mrs. Kim smiled knowingly. That man who walked you up, he looks at you like you're precious. Be careful with men like that. They either love you so much it saves you or destroys you. There's no middle ground. The next morning brought news that made Benita's stomach drop. The restaurant manager called to inform her that she no longer needed to come to work. Mr. Kang had arranged a new position for her at his company. Office work, better pay, legal contract with full benefits. The transition would happen immediately. Benita called Minho from her apartment, Ada playing on a blanket at her feet. You can't just change my job without asking me. I can, and I did. His voice was calm, absolute. You'll start Monday at Kang Tower. Human resources will handle your paperwork. Legal will finish processing your work visa. And before you argue, yes, this is happening whether you like it or not. You're being controlling. I'm being protective. There's a difference. A pause, then softer. Benita, I need to know you're safe. Working in that restaurant put you in contact with men who saw you as something to acquire. I won't allow that anymore. You won't allow it, she repeated. Like you have any say in my life. I have every say in your life because you gave me that right when you accepted my help. His voice hardened. You're under my protection now. That means I decide what's safe for you. Get used to it. She should have been furious. Should have told him to go to hell. Should have refused everything he offered. Instead, she found herself asking, what if I don't want to work in an office? What if I liked the restaurant? Then I'll buy you a restaurant. He said it so casually, like purchasing businesses was equivalent to buying coffee. Whatever you want, Benita, just not something that puts you in danger. You're impossible, and you're stubborn. We make a perfect pair. She could hear the smile in his voice. Now stop arguing and let me take care of you. It's what I'm good at. Monday morning arrived too quickly. Benita, dressed in the professional clothes Minho had sent over, expensive brands that fit perfectly because apparently he'd memorized her size. She dropped Ada off at a new daycare, also arranged by Minho, that cost more per month than her old rent but had waiting lists measured in years. Somehow, Minho had gotten Ada admitted immediately. Kang Tower was even more impressive in daylight, all glass and steel reaching toward the sky like ambition given physical form. Benita rode the elevator to the 45th floor, where human resources waited with paperwork and smiles that felt genuine. Within an hour, she had a legal contract, a work visa application in process, and an office with a view that made her dizzy. Her job was simple: organize Minho's schedule, screen his calls, manage his appointments, be the barrier between him and the world. It was easy work compared to washing dishes or serving drinks, but it also meant being near him constantly, watching him move through his day with lethal efficiency, seeing the way people feared and respected him in equal measure. A few days later, during a late evening when most employees had gone home, Benita was filing documents when Minho emerged from his office. "You're still here," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "I told you to leave at 5. There was a backlog in the filing system," she said without looking up. I wanted to fix it. You don't need to prove yourself. I already know you're competent. She finally looked at him. Do you? Because sometimes I wonder if you just keep me around because you feel sorry for me. The woman with the baby who couldn't afford formula. The charity case you rescued. Minho crossed the space between them in 3 strides, his hands landing on her desk with enough force to make her jump. You think this is charity? You think I'm doing all of this out of pity? His voice was low, dangerous, vibrating with barely controlled intensity. I haven't felt pity in 15 years. What I feel for you is so far from pity, it's in a different universe entirely. Then what is it? She whispered, her heart hammering. He leaned closer, his face inches from hers. It's obsession. It's need. It's waking up every morning thinking about you and going to sleep every night wishing you were beside me. It's wanting to give you everything I have and knowing I can't because you'd refuse it out of pride. It's this constant ache in my chest that won't go away no matter how much I try to ignore it. Benita couldn't breathe. Minho, we can't. Why not? Because you're dangerous. Because I have a daughter to protect. Because this would be the most reckless thing I've ever done. His hand lifted to cup her face. Then be reckless with me. Let me show you what it feels like to be wanted instead of needed. To be chosen instead of settled for. To be loved instead of tolerated. You don't love me. You barely know me. I know you fought to keep your daughter alive when most people would have given up. I know you count money 3 times before spending it because poverty taught you to be careful. I know you hum when you work and it's the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. I know that you're terrified of trusting me, but you do anyway because deep down you know I'd die before I let anyone hurt you. His thumb brushed across her cheek. So yes, Benita Obi, I know you. And yes, I love you. The confession hung between them like lightning waiting to strike. Before Benita could respond, before she could think or rationalize or protect herself, Minho closed the distance and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and consuming, tasting like everything she'd been denying herself for months. She kissed him back with equal hunger, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer until there was no space left between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Minho rested his forehead against hers. Come home with me tonight, not for anything except being together. I need to know what it feels like to have you close without this distance between us. I have Ada, Benita whispered. Bring her. I had my people set up a nursery at my penthouse weeks ago, just in case. You set up a nursery? Her voice was small, overwhelmed. Just in case. I've been preparing for you to be part of my life since the moment I saw you. His hand tangled in her hair. Now stop overthinking and say yes. She should refuse, should go home to her own apartment, should put distance between herself and this man who made her feel too much. Instead, she heard herself whisper, yes. Minho's penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a building in Cheongdam-dong, the kind of space that appeared in magazines about how the wealthy lived. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Han River. The furniture was minimalist and expensive, and tucked into a corner was a room painted soft yellow, filled with a crib and toys and everything a baby could need. You really did prepare for us, Benita said, her voice thick with emotion. Ada was already asleep in her carrier, exhausted from the day. I prepare for everything I want. He moved closer, his hands settling on her waist. And I've wanted you from the beginning. That night, they moved through the motions of domesticity that felt surreal and perfect. Minho ordered dinner from a restaurant Benita couldn't pronounce. They ate while Ada slept. They talked about nothing important and everything that mattered. And when the night grew late and exhaustion pulled at Benita's edges, Minho showed her to the master bedroom. Stay, he said simply. I won't touch you. I just want you close. She should have taken the guest room, should have maintained some boundary. Instead, she found herself nodding, changing into one of his shirts that hung to her thighs and sliding into bed beside him. He kept his promise, maintaining careful distance, but his hand found hers in the darkness, their fingers lacing together like a promise neither of them could voice yet. The weeks that followed established a pattern that felt dangerous and inevitable. Benita would work at Kang Tower during the day, managing Minho's schedule with increasing efficiency. At night, more often than not, she'd end up at his penthouse. They fell into routines that felt like playing house, like pretending they were normal people with normal lives instead of a criminal. and the woman falling in love with him despite every instinct screaming she shouldn't. Ada thrived. She started sleeping through the night in the nursery Minho had created. She smiled more, laughed at Minho's ridiculous attempts to speak to her in Korean and English, and broken Igbo he'd learned from online videos. She reached for him when she was upset, trusted him in ways that made Benita's heart ache. One Saturday morning in February, Benita woke to find Minho's side of the bed empty and voices coming from the kitchen. She found him with Ada strapped to his chest in a baby carrier, attempting to make breakfast while Ada grabbed at everything within reach. The domesticity of it made Benita want to cry. "You're going to burn something," she said from the doorway. "Probably." He grinned at her, and the expression transformed his face into something young and carefree. "But your daughter is a demanding supervisor. She insists I do everything one-handed while she provides commentary." "That's not commentary. That's her telling you to give up and order food." His laugh was genuine, warm. "Come help me before I prove you right." They made breakfast together in comfortable silence, Ada babbling between them, and Benita felt something settle in her chest. This was what she'd been searching for without knowing it. Not wealth or security or legal status, just this. Being wanted, being chosen, being loved. That afternoon, Minho received a call that changed his expression instantly. He switched to rapid Korean, his tone sharp and commanding. When he hung up, something cold had settled into his features. "I need to handle something. Business. It might take a few hours. You and Ada stay here. Don't leave for any reason." "What's wrong?" Benita asked, recognizing the warning signs. Someone made a move they shouldn't have. His jaw clenched. "I need to remind them why that was a mistake. Don't worry, it's nothing you need to be involved in. But Minho, be careful." Something in her voice made him stop. He crossed to her, cupped her face with both hands. "I'm always careful, but the fact that you worry makes me want to be more careful." He kissed her forehead. "I'll be back before dinner. Lock the door behind me." He left before she could protest further. Benita spent the afternoon trying not to imagine what business meant in Minho's world. She played with Ada, read books, tried to distract herself from the growing knot of anxiety in her stomach. When her phone rang hours later, she answered without checking the caller ID. "Benita Obi," a voice said in accented English. "My name is Chen Nakamura. You don't know me, but I know you very well. You're the woman Kang Minho has been protecting, the woman he cares about. That makes you valuable to me." Her blood went cold. "What do you want?" "I want you to deliver a message to Mr. Kang. Tell him the Nakamura family doesn't forget debts. Tell him that taking what belongs to us has consequences. And tell him that if he doesn't return our stolen property within 48 hours, we'll take something precious from him instead." The line went dead. Benita stood frozen, Ada playing at her feet, terror crawling up her spine like ice. This was the danger Mrs. Kim had warned her about. This was the reality of loving a man who lived in violence. This was the price of choosing him. When Minho returned 2 hours later, blood spattered on his shirt collar and exhaustion carved into his features, Benita met him at the door with Ada in her arms. "Someone called me, the Nakamura family. They threatened to take something precious from you if you don't return what you stole." Minho went absolutely still, his expression shifting from exhausted to lethal in a heartbeat. "What exactly did they say?" She repeated the conversation word for word. With each sentence, she watched Minho's fury build like a gathering storm. When she finished, he pulled out his phone and made several calls in rapid Korean. Then he turned to her with eyes that held barely controlled rage. "Pack a bag for you and Ada. You're leaving Seoul tonight. I have a safe house in Jeju. You'll stay there until this is handled. I'm not running." Her voice was steady despite her fear. "And neither is my daughter. We're not leaving you. Benita, these people don't make empty threats. If they've contacted you directly, they're preparing to move. I need you somewhere they can't reach. Then we face them together." She set Ada in her playpen and crossed to him. "You told me I was under your protection. That means I stand beside you, not behind you. That means we handle this as partners. Unless you lied about wanting me as a partner, unless I'm still just someone you're protecting." Minho's expression cracked, showing the fear beneath the fury. "I can't lose you." His voice was raw. "Do you understand that? I've built an empire on violence and strategy and never caring about casualties. But you and Ada, you're different. You're the only things that matter more than the Empire. If something happens to you because of my world, it will destroy me. Then don't let something happen." She gripped his shirt. "Teach me to protect myself. Teach me to fight. Teach me everything you know so I can stand beside you, instead of being another thing you have to worry about." His hands framed her face. "You're already the bravest person I know. But bravery won't stop bullets. It stopped you from ignoring me in that convenience store. It made you pay for my formula. It brought us here." She leaned into his touch. "So trust it now. Trust me. Trust that we're stronger together than apart." He kissed her then, desperate and deep, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. "If we do this together, you follow my lead. No arguments. No risks. You and Ada are my priority above everything, including the Empire, including my life. Promise me." "I promise," she whispered. He kissed her again, softer this time. "Then, starting tomorrow, you learn how to survive my world. But tonight," his voice dropped lower, "tonight I need to show you exactly what you mean to me. Before anything else happens, before the danger comes, I need you to know." The night that followed erased every boundary they'd maintained for months. Minho was gentle and fierce in equal measure, his touch reverent, his voice rough with emotion as he told her in 3 languages that she was his, that he loved her, that nothing would take her from him. And Benita surrendered completely, giving him everything she'd been guarding, trusting him with pieces of herself she'd thought were broken beyond repair. Later, wrapped in sheets that cost more than her old apartment, his arms around her and Ada sleeping peacefully in the next room, Benita whispered, "I love you too, even though I shouldn't, even though it's dangerous, even though your world is violence. I love you." Minho's arms tightened around her. "Then we'll survive it together. Because I'm not letting you go. Not for the Nakamura family. Not for anyone. You're mine now, Benita, and I protect what's mine with everything I have." The morning brought reality crashing back. Minho had security doubled around the penthouse. He hired bodyguards specifically for Benita and Ada. He moved them between locations unpredictably, never staying anywhere long enough to establish patterns. And he started teaching Benita what survival looked like in his world. She learned to shoot in a private range in the building's basement, learned to watch for tails when driving, learned to catalog exits everywhere she went, learned the weight of a knife hidden in her clothes, learned that loving Minho meant accepting that violence might find them no matter how careful they were. A week passed. Then, too, the Nakamura family's 48-hour deadline came and went with no action. But Minho's tension didn't ease. If anything, it grew worse. "They're waiting for us to relax," he said one night. "Waiting for us to think the threat has passed. That's when they'll strike." He was right. On a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after the initial call, Benita was leaving Kang Tower's underground parking with Ada when 3 cars boxed in Minho's driver. Men in masks emerged before the driver could react. One pressed a gun to the driver's window, the others moved toward Benita's door. Training took over. Benita hit the emergency button Minho had installed, alerting him and security simultaneously. She locked the doors, pulled Ada's car seat lower, covered her daughter's body with her own, heard men shouting in Japanese and Korean, felt the car rock as they tried to break the bulletproof glass. Ada was crying. Benita was praying, and the 30 seconds before Minho's security arrived felt like centuries. Gunfire, shouting, the sound of bodies hitting concrete. Then Minho's voice cutting through everything, commanding, furious, desperate. "Benita, Benita, open the door. It's over. They're down." She unlocked the door with shaking hands. Minho pulled her from the car, checked her for injuries with hands that trembled, took Ada from her arms, and held them both like they were his last tether to sanity. "You're okay. You're both okay." His voice cracked. "God, when I got the alert, I thought, they're scared." Crying both, sobbing against his chest, Ada wailing between them. But alive, whole, protected by the man who'd promised to burn cities to keep them safe. Minho held them until the police arrived, until his lawyers smoothed everything over, until the bodies were removed and the parking garage was cleared. Then he took them home, to the penthouse that had become their sanctuary. That night, after Ada was asleep and Benita had stopped shaking, Minho sat her down with an expression that held finality. "This ends tomorrow, I'm meeting with the Nakamura family to negotiate terms. Either they back off permanently, or I dismantle their entire Seoul operation. Either way, you and Ada will never be threatened again." "Let me come with you," Benita said immediately. "Absolutely not." His voice was steel. "You're staying here with enough security to protect a president. I'm not risking you. Then don't risk yourself either." She gripped his hands. "Minho, I can't lose you. After everything, after falling in love with you despite knowing I shouldn't, I can't watch you walk into danger alone. You won't lose me." He pulled her close. "Because I have too much to live for now. I have you. I have Ada. I have a future I actually want, instead of just building an empire I don't care about. That's worth being careful for. Promise me you'll come back. I promise." He kissed her deeply. "And when I do, we're making this official. Marriage, adoption papers for Ada, everything legal and permanent. Because you're my family now, Benita. Not just someone I'm protecting. My family." Tears streamed down her face. "You're asking me to marry you before going to a potentially lethal meeting." He smiled against her lips. "I'm a criminal, not a romantic. I take what I want when I want it. And I want you as my wife before anyone else tries to take you from me." "Then yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you. Yes to all of it." The next day felt like walking through water. Every minute stretched too long. Benita tried to work, to distract herself, but her mind kept circling back to Minho walking into a room full of people who wanted him dead, to the possibility that Ada might grow up without the man who'd become her father, to the terrible weight of loving someone whose life was measured in calculated risks. When her phone finally rang with Minho's number, she answered before the first ring finished. "It's done." His voice was tired but alive. "The Nakamura family has agreed to permanent ceasefire. They're pulling all operations from Seoul. It's over, Benita. You're safe. Ada's safe. We're all safe." She collapsed into her office chair, relief and exhaustion crashing over her in waves. "Come home. Please just come home. I'm already on my way." He paused. "And I'm bringing paperwork. We're getting married tomorrow. No waiting. No delays. Tomorrow you become officially mine." The wedding happened in a small office in Gangnam, with a judge Minho had on retainer and witnesses pulled from his trusted security team. Benita wore a simple white dress Minho had sent over. Ada wore a little hanbok that made her look like a doll, and Minho wore a suit that probably cost more than a car, but his eyes held something priceless when he looked at Benita. The vows were simple, legal, binding. When the judge pronounced them married, Minho kissed her like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment, like she was oxygen and he was finally breathing. Like nothing else in his violent, complicated world mattered except this woman and this child who'd become his family. 3 months later, Benita stood in the penthouse's bathroom, staring at a pregnancy test with 2 pink lines. She'd suspected for weeks but hadn't wanted to believe it. Now she held proof that her family was growing, that she and Minho were creating something new together, something that belonged to both of them completely. She found him in his office, working late despite promising to stop by 10. He looked up when she entered, his expression softening immediately. "You should be sleeping. I have something to tell you." She sat on his desk, handed him the test. "We're pregnant." For 3 seconds, Minho didn't move. Then he was on his feet, pulling her into his arms, kissing her like she'd just given him the world. Which, in a way, she had. "Are you sure?" His voice was rough with emotion. "Very sure. I went to the doctor yesterday. 8 weeks. We're having a baby in January." He sank into his chair, pulled her into his lap, his hand immediately settling on her stomach where nothing showed yet. "A baby. Our baby." His eyes were wet. "Benita, you've given me everything. A family. A reason to be better. A future worth living for. You gave me those things first," she said softly. "That night in the convenience store when you paid for my formula, you gave me hope when I had none left. You gave me safety when I was drowning. You gave me love when I thought I was unlovable. So we saved each other." They sat like that until the city lights began to fade into dawn, planning nurseries and names and a future that felt impossible and perfect. The next months passed in a blur of doctor's appointments and baby preparations, and Ada learning that she'd be a big sister. Minho was attentive to the point of obsession, treating Benita like she was made of glass, ensuring she had everything she needed before she knew she needed it. Their son was born on a January morning when Seoul was buried in snow. Lee Min-jun came into the world screaming his displeasure, all healthy lungs and tiny fists. Minho held him with hands that had signed death warrants and built empires and cried without shame. "He's perfect," Minho whispered, his voice breaking. "You're perfect. Our family is perfect." Benita watched him with their son in his arms and Ada climbing into the hospital bed beside her, and knew that this was what she'd been searching for all along. Not wealth or status or safety from deportation, just this. Being chosen every day, being loved without conditions, being family. 5 years later, Benita stood in the kitchen of their Pyeongchang-dong house, watching through the windows as Min-ho pushed Ada on the swings, while Min-jun chased butterflies through grass that had been carefully maintained by people whose names she now knew. Her life had transformed so completely that sometimes she still couldn't believe it. She ran a foundation that helped immigrant women navigate Seoul's systems. She had friends who didn't judge her accent or her skin. She had legal status that couldn't be revoked. She had everything she dreamed about during those desperate months when counting coins for formula felt like drowning. But more than any of that, she had him. She had mornings where Min-ho brought her coffee in bed. She had nights where he read to their children in 3 languages. She had a partner who'd walked through fire to protect her and would do it again without hesitation. She had love that had started in a convenience store and grown into something unshakable. Min-ho caught her watching from the window. He smiled, that rare, genuine smile she'd learned to coax out of him. Then he said something to the children that made them race toward the house, their laughter carrying on the wind. The door burst open. Ada, now 7 and fierce and fluent in 4 languages, announced that Min-jun had eaten a bug. Min-jun, 5 and already showing his father's stubborn streak, insisted it was an accident. Benita gathered them both close, her heart so full it ached. Min-ho appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame, watching his family with an expression that still took her breath away. "What are you thinking about?" she asked him. "How lucky I am." He moved closer, his arms coming around all of them. "That I almost missed this because I was too busy building an empire I didn't care about. That a woman counting coins for formula saved my life by letting me save hers. We saved each other." Benita repeated the words she'd told him years ago. "That's what family does." He kissed her then, soft and certain and full of promises kept. Outside, Seoul stretched toward the horizon, full of people counting coins and dreaming of safety. Inside this house, a woman from Nigeria and a man from Seoul's underworld had built something that should have been impossible. They'd built love from desperation, family from chaos, and a future from the rubble of their pasts. And every morning when Benita woke up beside the man who'd once been a stranger in a convenience store, she counted her blessings instead of her coins and knew that sometimes the best things in life came from being in the wrong place at exactly the right time.